Everybody, welcome to this Kubernetes interview questions and answer session. All of these questions and answers are already in a published GitHub repo. I'll leave the link to the repo in the description below. So if you prefer a written version of this, that's where you go. But in the video, I give you a lot more context around the questions and what the interviewer might be thinking when he or she is asking you these questions. All right, let's get started. Today's first question: what is an easy way to look up Kubernetes documentation on the fly, simply using the kubectl command? This is probably the most favorite topic in Kubernetes, and my most favorite question to ask. Why? Because even in the CKD or CKA exam, you can really get a lot of stuff done without having to know anything, just by using kubectl explain command. So for example, you can say kubectl explain pod. It will give you the top level attributes of the pods, and it'll give you exactly what they are, like objects or maps and strings and whatnot. Let's say that you already know part of it. So you can say kubectl explain pod.spec. So then it gives you all the attributes under spec and what they're supposed to be. In the other way you can use this, you can, if you have a guess as to what the attribute might be, but you don't know what layer it's in, what path it's in, you can do the following. You can do kubectl explain dash recursive pod. It will dump out the whole API documentation, and then if you can grep for a particular thing that you're looking for, then you can know exactly where it fits in the attributes tree of the pods, right? And this applies to any other resources like deployments and whatnot. So especially during the exam, when you're looking for what exactly put in your YAML file, this is a great way to know it, right? And like that, without having to look them up online or having to memorize them, right? The reason why the interviewer would be asking you this question is simply for him or her to know that you've used this command in the past, right? That if you're in production environment supporting it, you probably have used this several times. All right, next question about Kubernetes security. How are some of the ways you can protect your container images? So container images, there are many things you can do, but there are the top three things I can think of right now. Is first of all, you have to update them so that the OS level are patched. So you're not using an older OS version that can be vulnerable by now. You should also scan them regularly for vulnerabilities against today's CVE definitions. You also should sign them, because digitally, obviously, but because if you don't sign them, somebody else could hack into and change, pardon me, change um, um, the container image, and you would never know that the image got hacked, and you're now using a hacked version of the image, right? So that's why you should digitally sign the container images, so that you know those are the same ones that you've already put them yourself. Can you think of some general areas of Kubernetes where you would think about security? This can last all day, but here's some of the areas you should look at. Container images we already looked at, the registry, the infrastructure that it saved. For example, the etc, the configuration database. What about the host that's running the clusters on? The secrets, obviously. The certificate, that should be protected, the private ones anyway. And then, of course, if you have people accessing your cluster, the role-based access control things like service accounts and roles and whatnot, those are the areas that you should be focusing on if you are in charge of securing your Kubernetes cluster. Again, this is a very broad topic here. The interviewer is looking for your ideas about security, because today in the DevOps world, security is everywhere from day one to day end, right? All right, next question. Processes within a container, how do they talk to the API server? So in a container, whenever there's a container running or a pod running, there's always a default service account. That default service account comes with certain default privileges, and that's so when you create a pod or a container, the certificate is actually handed over to the API server, so then API server can respond accordingly. So that's the answer. What the interviewer is looking for is your knowledge that the container by default is not insecure. It does come with the certificate that it gets automatically, and that's what is used. Of course, you might want to think about using a non-default one, but at least it's secure at least at that level, right? You should know that. Last question for today. What is base64 and why do you need that? You would know this if you played around with any of this Kubernetes secrets, and that's what the interview is looking for. Like, for example, if you are saving a database password in Kubernetes secrets, they're not encrypted by default. They are encoded. So what will happen is if we take a clear text password and you use that as the value for the secret, it will not be the value that actually will end up being, because it assumes it's been encoded. So you will try to decode that particular text that you gave it. So for you to actually have a right password, you should take the password, whatever it is, right? You would run the base64 command against it. It will give you a much longer string, and that's the string that you put on as the data value for the secret, as the database password used in your database machines or containers on your cluster. That's how this flow works. Here, the interviewer is looking for your knowledge, day-to-day knowledge, that you know this. Otherwise, if you have never worked with Kubernetes, you might get caught up in answering this question because you wouldn't know anything about this default behavior that Kubernetes has set up. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next Kubernetes interview video.